Sarah Bond had a great article in The Fix about two studies that say drug users, on average, are about 15 IQ points more intelligent than non-drug users. This is really, really interesting to me because that flies directly in the face of the propaganda that we're all so used to hearing. You know, I mean, remember DARE, Drug Abuse Resistance Education, I think it stands for. I had to go through that when I was a kid, and the propaganda that they were pushing was, well, the people who take drugs are lowlives. They're idiots. They're the bottom of the barrel. You know, these are the people who you don't want to associate with. And I'm sure sometimes that's true, that the people who do drugs are like, fuck it, I'm just going to check out of the system and do that the rest of my life, and it is what it is. But according to this study, on average, drug users are actually smarter, according to the two studies, I should say. So both studies come from the Center for Longitudinal Studies, the CLS. One was released in 2011 and another in 2012. Both studies followed 17,000 people from when they were young, and they found higher IQs correlated with an increase in drug use later on in life. Now, the reasons as to why that is are speculative, but those are also really interesting. So let me give you a few of their ideas. One idea is that intelligence is linked with an increased need for stimulation, and drugs provide that stimulation. And the reason why that's a positive thing is that the stimulation keeps us sharp for problem solving, and it ups our ability to do critical thinking in a survival situation. When we're faced with a difficult situation, those people would be more sharp. So that's one hypothesis they had. The other idea is that smart people are oftentimes bored and isolated and depressed because high IQ people are linked oftentimes with social maladjustment. We all know that stereotype of like the really smart guy who's like alone in his dark room because he doesn't like get along well with people because he's so smart he just doesn't link. You know what I mean? There's a social weirdness there. So the idea is that the isolation leads to trying drugs. And then the third idea is that high IQ people may have low emotional IQs. And there's a link between low emotional intelligence and drug use. So think of like what came into my mind when I read that is like, oh, okay, so it's like Dr. House, for example, always popping the Vicodins, and he's this brilliant guy who solves all these cases. And of course, he's a fictional character. But you could still see what they're talking about nonetheless. That you could be really smart with like logical deductions, but you can't really connect with people on an emotional level because it's two separate areas. Same like Sherlock Holmes too. I know, again, granted, another fictional character, but you can imagine such a character, somebody who is really intelligent and a real logical thinker, but their emotional intelligence is low. And a lot of scientists and doctors are like that too. You know, I've experienced that in my own life. I'm sure a lot of you have. I know that's anecdotal, but the stereotype of like a cold-hearted, you know, stone-faced scientist who's just trying to get the answer, and he's not like the best father, for example, or something like that. So those are the different ideas, and those are open to discussion, they're open to debate. We don't know the exact reason as to why the studies came out the way that they did, but here's what's not open to discussion or debate. According to the studies, it is just true that people who use drugs, on average, are about 15 IQ points more intelligent than people who don't use it. So the bottom line is, look, am I saying we should treat drug users in a superior way to how we treat people who don't use drugs? Of course not. That's not what I'm saying at all. But what I am saying is that stereotype where people look down their noses, they look condescendingly at drug users, and they say, "Ooh, get your life together. What the fuck is wrong with you? You must be a lowlife." That stereotype has to die.